Hello again and welcome back everyone. In this lecture, I'm going to show you how to troubleshoot problems in ArcGIS. You probably remember that early on we had a lecture on how to get help. This one's going to be a little different. You already know how to get help, but I want to show you how to deal with common issues that occur specifically in ArcGIS. You'll use some of those skills in getting help when you're troubleshooting, but I also want to go over some specific strategies and particular issues in ArcGIS that will help you get over those hurdles faster. So to start with, we all run into errors. We all run into crashes. We all run into problems doing our geoprocessing. It's just a fact of doing GIS. We're analysts, and as analysts, we need to troubleshoot technical problems. To kind of drive this home, I ran into tons of errors just preparing materials for this course. And at some point, you just don't even notice it for the most part anymore. You just work through it because that's what you do. You know how to get through these major issues and minor issues that appear all the time. I debate about showing you those errors at the time that I encounter them when I'm preparing materials for a course like this, because it helps prepare you for the reality of the work you're doing, but at the same time, it's a major distraction from the themes I'm trying to show you in whatever lecture. So instead of showing it to you in the lecture that the errors occurred, I'm going to show you a little bit of it now and how to work through it. So to start with, we're going to work through one of the errors that I encountered when I was working with the spatial join lecture. It was a relatively simple error, but it could have been daunting if I was new to GIS. So to start with, we'll go to the geoprocessing results pane by clicking geoprocessing and going to results. And since I already had it open, it'll fly out from the right, but if you didn't, it'll come up new. And I could see that in a previous session of using ArcGIS on Tuesday, I had 3 errors while running the spatial join tool. And if I expand them, I can see what the messages are here. And it can be kind of cryptic sometimes. People a lot of times don't know exactly what they're looking at or where to look, but I want to point out a couple important things here. First, it gives me all the parameter information. It tells me everything I provided to the tool. So it's a great record keeping tool in looking at the geoprocessing results pane. It also shows all the environment settings so that in diagnosing the problem, I know exactly what happened. And then it gives me all the messages. It says what command it executed, the start time, and any other messages that occurred. And in this case, it got an error pretty quickly. It didn't print out any other messages. And this error message, error 001156, who knows what that is, failed on input OID 42, could not write value San Bernardino Riverside to output field name, is pretty cryptic, and when you understand it, is even pretty generic still. So it's saying it failed on a particular record and it couldn't write that value to the output field. Okay, but why? Why couldn't you so I can fix this? That's the question that a lot of you will ask when you first encounter some of these error messages. Well, the first thing to do is to click on the error code there, because it'll bring up the help, and it'll bring up the help for that particular code and show the generic case of it, and then give a description and a potential solution. So in this case, it's actually relatively good. And it says, for example, text values cannot be added to numeric fields, and text values cannot be added to text fields if the values are longer than the field length. Solution, change the field type or increase the field length in the field map properties. Okay, let's see what I can do about that. So if I double click on this run of the spatial join tool, it'll bring back up the tool populated with everything I'd set in order to run it this particular time. And it's unhappy because this output already exists. So we'll give it error lecture demo name. And I'm going to leave everything else as it is, but I'll show you what I can do about it. So where that was pointing is that in the field map, remember how in the actual lecture, what we did is we came down to the name field and we went to properties and we changed the length from 20 to 1000. Well, when I was preparing the materials, I forgot to do that. So the field length was still 20 and it was trying to put information longer than 20 characters into that field. So it crashed the tool and failed and gave me that error. So if I put in 1000 now, it'll run the tool correctly. Now let's pretend it wouldn't though. So I'm going to close these out. And if I didn't have a solution to this problem already, what I would do is I would take that information there and I would put it into a web search. So let's move this to the left half of our screen, and then I'll select the web browser on the right half here and move that a little so I can see this better. And let's just type in error 001156 and then failed on input OID comma, could not write value, and see what it gives me. So first, it gives me ArcGIS's help documents. Those are the same things that I just saw when I clicked on the error code here. But it also finds other people who have similar issues. And this one you could see has a different error code, but maybe a similar issue. So I could start clicking into these threads and browsing other people's help or other people's questions and see what kinds of help others have provided those individuals when they ran into similar problems, and then try those types of things on my own problem here and see if I can resolve the issue. Effective use of search engines is going to be a savior to you when you run into problems, and knowing how to rephrase your issues, both by putting in the generic case of this, by not putting in the exact number here and not putting in this thing specific to my problem, is important, because other people aren't going to have this particular message. They're not going to have could not write value San Bernardino Riverside. They're going to have could not write value to output field. And so in searching for this, I need to make a more generic search query and then see if I can identify the threads of questions that have similar issues to mine. Some of them might look similar to the search engine, but when I get to them, they won't actually be that helpful for me. Now, this is the number one thing you can do to help yourself. You can even go to sites like gis.stackexchange.com right here and ask questions yourself, or to Esri's GeoNet website. And there are whole communities there designed to help you with GIS problems, and they're great people who know how to work with ArcGIS. But sometimes searching is going to fail, and sometimes even asking those types of questions is going to fail. So I want to show you some other general troubleshooting you can do when you run into problems that you either can't find a solution for, or where ArcGIS doesn't give you enough information. Like maybe it crashes, or maybe it'll give you the infamous error 999999, which has no error message. It's unknown error. So some things I can do in those instances are simple to very complicated. And the first one that you've probably heard in all kinds of instances before is turn it off and back on again. So restart ArcMap. Sometimes issues just go away when you reboot ArcMap. Other times they don't. And I've seen cases where people tried restarting ArcMap and it didn't fix it, but then where they went and restarted their computer and the problem went away. I've had issues where sometimes I'll close ArcMap, but when I'm running into issues, it doesn't completely close and it's still kind of running in the background on my computer until I reboot. And then when I reboot, I actually get an actual fresh copy of ArcMap and the issue goes away. So that's solution number one, especially if you're running into file locking issues or the ability to not edit something or change a data file or export to a geodatabase. Definitely restart ArcMap, restart your computer, and occasionally if it's in a shared location, check if anyone else has those spots open. A sort of variation on that theme is I've seen errors that only occurred in specific map documents. So it could have been that if I had some unknown error in this spatial join map document here, that maybe I just need to do this same operation from a new map document. So I'd click the new button here and I'd add my data into the new map document, and then I'd try running it there. And sometimes I have luck running an operation in a new map document when it fails in an existing one. They can accumulate all sorts of information in them, all sorts of problems over time. So especially if you have a big beefy old map document, just try running it in a new one. One other thing to check is to try setting or unsetting different environment variables. So if I had run my geoprocessing tool and maybe I'd set some specific environment variables, either trying to do something fancy or trying to constrain my analysis in some way, I should try it without doing that if I'd set them, or go check for relevant environment variables that might apply to either where I'm exporting my data to or something like that, and see if it's possible that something in my environment settings is making this process fail. Another thing I've seen that happens a whole lot less than it used to, but was pretty common in the ArcGIS 9 series, is that sometimes it won't work on your current data format or with your current Scratch workspace. So maybe it doesn't, whatever tool I'm working with doesn't like working with data in file geodatabase format, and I need to export a raster out to just a grid raster or something like that, which you don't know about yet, but try changing your raster formats or your vector layer formats to a different file type. So from a file geodatabase to like a shapefile or something, and see if the tool likes that a little better and if it works better. Another thing to keep in mind could be issues related to projections and coordinate systems. So sometimes when working with data in different projections, you might want to set an environment setting that unifies their projection into one that you know of instead of having Arc do it for you. Or maybe you set the projections or the coordinate system in the environment settings and that created a problem. So try not doing that. I've also seen issues where occasionally a tool doesn't work well on a specific data set in a specific projection. So I've seen some tools that didn't like working on rasters in geographic coordinate systems. I needed to put them into a projected coordinate system before it would work with them. And then one final thing to mention for this lecture that I'd be remiss to not mention to you is sometimes you just need to go read the help. So if you go to ArcGIS Desktop Help, it'll bring up the whole help documentation and I can search it here. If you like the web format better, you can bring up the ArcGIS Desktop Web Help. And in either case, I've had plenty of problems where I've thought that something was misbehaving, and then I went and thoroughly read the tool's description and found out that no, the tool is behaving correctly, and I wasn't understanding what I needed to do well. I may have said it before, but I'll say it again. I think ArcGIS's help is some of the best in the industry. I've worked with plenty of different software systems, not necessarily in GIS, but just in general, where the help is not very thorough and you always wonder if you're missing something. And in most cases, the ArcGIS Desktop Help feels very complete, and it feels like once you've read it, you know everything you need to know in order to solve problems and know how to use these tools. That's why it's an important self-help resource. It's faster than talking to other people, and you don't have to convey your problem completely. You understand it already, and when reading the help documentation, you can decide what's applicable to you. So definitely make sure to make use of that. If you run into lots of issues in geoprocessing or in working with ArcMap in general, definitely ask yourself if you have a bug in ArcMap or if you have a processing workflow problem. As in the case where I said I had a raster that wouldn't process because it was in a geographic coordinate system, I had to rework my processing workflow because I just wasn't certain that the workflow I was relying on anymore was going to get me to where I wanted to go. So pay attention to whether or not you have just a temporary issue or something that points to a broader problem in your work. And sometimes you just have a temporary small mistake and you notice it and it feels silly at the time and you redo it and everything works. And finally, there are bugs in ArcGIS. It has also gotten a lot more stable and a lot better in terms of having bugs, but it's a complex piece of software and it has plenty of issues within it. Esri releases service packs for ArcGIS, and I recommend in most cases that you install them, but that you read the release notes they provide first and check for any issues that you've had. Like just do a search of the page for the tool name that maybe you've had a lot of issues with. There was one time where I had a lot of issues with a tool called Zonal Statistics, and Esri was releasing patches that had lots of fixes, and it turned out that they had patched the problem that I had. Some longtime GIS users worry about installing a service pack that potentially creates new bugs and trading the bugs they already know about for bugs they don't know about. I'd say that while you're new, it's probably worth just keeping up to date so that you have the most up-to-date security updates and the most up-to-date feature and bug updates. Okay, that's it for this lesson. In this lesson, I showed you some general ways you could help yourself troubleshoot in ArcGIS by using geoprocessing results pane to find different information about your errors and then how to search that information online, and some general strategies for how to deal with problem solving in ArcGIS in particular. One last thing to mention though, is that while you're in this course, you should certainly use the course forum to ask for help. But I wanted to make sure that you knew all of this information on troubleshooting because when you're on your own, it can be helpful to know how to deal with it yourself. Okay, have fun. See you next time.